Today, as part of the LGMA Oral History Project, Paul and I will be having a discussion about the different roles that Paul's been involved with throughout his life, with a primary focus on his roles within local government. So, Paul, I might ask you, how have you got involved in local government?
Well, I have a long and apparently rather varied career. I have a PhD in physics, which I got from Monash University many years ago. I've been involved, all of my working life has been in the education and welfare, largely non-profit sort of area. That involved work with the Total Health Education Foundation here in Warwick, involved with the school of Total Education. I was administrative principal for a couple of years.
Okay, I know that school. It's a great school.
And from there, I got involved in a charity looking at retraining opportunities for young people at risk of crime and victimisation.
Okay.
It was a thing called Project Australia. It was a registered charity. We worked for a couple of years to assemble suitable staff and get funding from state and federal government and corporates. It got underway, was conducted for 9 months, and the timing of the funding wasn't really adequate to the structure of it, and we unfortunately had to cease the operation, which was a great shame. But I then moved into a role with Griffith University, Manager of Research Grants and Publications. So I was involved with helping all the academics in the university seek grant funding and report on it, etc.
Which campus was that at, Paul?
I was based at Nathan,
okay,
but I was involved with all the campuses.
No worries.
I then spent 2 to 3 years as Executive Officer to the Deputy Vice Chancellor Research. And from that point, I was, throughout all of this, I've been living in Warwick. So I was living away from home during the week for nearly 10 years there. And I was really keen to find rewarding work that was nearer to home. And I looked at various things. Suddenly, at the point where we were about to take a driving holiday to Melbourne, I noticed the advertisement for the Executive Management Officer at Toowoomba Regional Council. And I thought, well, look, I'd love to do that. It sort of responds to all of my strengths, but so I'll give it a go. I didn't expect to get offered the job because I made the assumption that people in local government will be looking for staff with background in local government. But in actual fact, I got a phone call whilst on the road in Victoria and did the interview over phone at a roadside stop.
Right, yeah.
So it was pretty unconventional. And then on return, I was shortlisted and had a further interview face to face. And obviously what was at play was that it was just post amalgamation, and there was an appetite to have people in support who didn't necessarily have the background in local government. In other words, not carrying preconceptions of how things could be done. Not
carrying any baggage.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was avoiding that word, but
yes, no, it's a good
that
word.
was certainly used. Yeah. So the other unusual factor of it was that the CEO who invited me to join the council, Phil Spencer, resigned 2 days after he offered me the job. So I never worked for the person who actually recruited me. And I worked for several months for Brian Pidgeon, who's currently the CEO,
okay,
who was then acting CEO.
Yep.
And then Ken Galthup joined the council. So it was a...
and the CEO now, though, is?
Brian Pidgeon.
Yep.
So in actual fact, Brian has spent, even before he was appointed, had spent more time as CEO there than anybody else, because he's such a competent person with such a grip on the whole organisation. He acted for successive periods between other appointments. And I was really pleased to see that when Mr Goldthorpe finished up, Council took quite some time to deliberate and to appoint somebody else, but they had the very good sense to appoint Brian. Because,
well, as you may know, Brian's a ratepayer here at the Southern Downs as well.
Yes, in Delvine. Yeah.
Delvine.
That's right. But I mean, that really did impress me, because you look around and you see those sort of situations, leadership of an organisation, whether it's a council or a corporate, they tend to feel as though they have to show that they made a major effort. They brought in a new broom and so on.
Yep.
But they resisted that temptation, recognising Brian's experience and qualities, and appointed him. I thought it was a great decision.
Oh, good. How has physics been applied within your local government roles?
Well, physics as such probably hasn't, except that I am able to understand the research for issues like hydropower and so on that come towards council. But really the relevance of a PhD is the subject matter is to a degree irrelevant. It's about the ability to persevere through a task and organise information, research, test your own honesty, intellectual honesty.
Mm-hmm.
So in many ways it teaches you things that are vital in any leadership role.
So, Paul, how long have you been in your role? And maybe if you can give me an example of what's involved in your average day.
Well, for the first 7 years, a primary involvement was organising, running, minuting and following through the actions of the executive management team. So that's basically the weekly meetings of the CEO and general managers. So it's probably fairly obvious what was involved in that. But it did sort of play to strengths I think I've developed over the years of being a good listener, being a good not a networker, but a communicator, a drawing together of information and people. But over the last 3 years, the greater need has been to provide direct support to the Mayor. Mm-hmm. So my involvement there is particularly to support the Mayor with regional collaboration, and mm-hmm. that includes the Council of Mayors South East Queensland, of which Mayor Antonio is the Deputy Chair, but also the Council of Mayors for Darling Downs and South West, mm-hmm. With which Toowoomba joins with Southern Downs and 8 other councils out to the South Australian border. So there are many tasks and challenges there to use one's skills.
And you mentioned before that your PhD has helped you a lot with your research. What are some of the things that you would research within the local government sector that then appear on the agenda, either at Toowoomba Regional Council or as part of that group of mayors?
Well, whatever issues are rising as really relevant for the council and for the councils of mayors. For Toowoomba at the moment, a focus is in migration and refugees and settlement within its own local government area, and trying to foster settlement further west. So there's research into what the legal situation is, what services are available, precedents around Australia and overseas. Other major things for Toowoomba, of course, involve projects like the Second Range Crossing and Inland Rail, and with the Council of Mayors for Darling Downs and South West, we're trying to draw together a rail forum to help the mayors appreciate what are the actual barriers facing the attempt to get efficient freight to port for rural for agricultural products in the context where coal dominates everything.
Yep.
So I suppose the research has been pretty essential, because I'm originally an urbanite. I grew up in Melbourne. So it's been fascinating and a privilege to work with particularly the mayors and communities out west, because they have involvements and challenges that are all new and interesting to me.
So, Paul, what are some of the things that would have been on the agenda when you first started that are no longer on the agenda? And what are some of the things that are brand new to the agenda that you deal with most recently? You spoke about migration and how Toowoomba's changing. What are some of the early things that you may have crossed off the list on the agenda because it's all been achieved, or no longer relevant to the local government sector?
Well, an obvious one was the adjustment to amalgamation. Yeah. Toowoomba regional council involves 8 previous shires and 130,000 square kilometres. It's been an ongoing challenge to try and achieve the economies of scale that were sort of promised by amalgamation, but seldom delivered. And at the same time, trying to balance that off by ways in which the communities right across the region can feel involved and able to access their representatives. With the shrinkage in the number of elected representatives for the whole region, from I think it was 58 down to 10 plus the mayor. Toowoomba Regional Council went through a process of centralising some of the functions and try to have their administration run through functional areas rather than geographic locations. That's had certainly has some definite benefits, particularly in terms of drawing together the data systems and the management systems of all the areas and making them more consistent, and enabling the council to report as they're required to for audit and QTC and so on. But against that, it's been an inevitable sense for the communities further from Toowoomba that they're more isolated. So that's still being worked on by council.
And some of the things that are now on the agenda that all those years ago you would have said, why on earth is a local government authority dealing with this, or is this something new and innovative?
Yes, well, the whole area of migration is certainly one. Local governments are in a tricky position there because the decisions about who gets settled in what parts of Australia are federal government decisions, and Toowoomba's has a reputation, probably well earned, of being a pretty successful community to integrate new arrivals because of very outstanding community groups and church groups who have established patterns of welcoming and so on. But because of that success, Toowoomba is now expecting a burgeoning of numbers coming in, and that includes communities with very major cultural and language differences. So there's really big challenges there. So I'm enjoying assisting the mayor and the council in finding ways of building the networks locally, working with the federal representatives, and taking advantage of such resources as the Welcoming Cities Network. And so that's one area. The other ones, which are fairly exciting, is the development of the inland rail, and the fact that Toowoomba, being geographically located at the intersection of major national routes, is just emerging as a national hub for transport and freight. And again, that's an area that I've known nothing about, rail freight. It's a good challenge.
So Paul, you're in a position where you can see the very raw aspects of local government when you're working that closely with the mayor. What do you believe some of the challenges of your role have been in the past, working with the mayor and obviously going through a process of wondering whether the mayor's going to come out of the other end of the election or not, and wondering who those elected representatives will be in the room?
Well, it's an interesting challenge. I'll tell you about an earlier challenge when I was working at the university. There's a need for people to really to recognise what their professional role is, and the work that I did at university involved giving the utmost support to every research application, and they included things which I personally believed in very strongly, particularly those that were of huge community benefit, crime prevention and social justice. But at the same time, you have to give equal support and work to those things which personally you don't have any interest in, and some of those were one that I remember was a study of the potential long-term impact of the show Big Brother. it was important to make sure that the application was the very best that it could be,
yes.
and it got funded. But you have to apply a professional mindset to the quality of your work.
Goodness me, you've probably cursed that, so that means that show will come back soon. But anyway, there we go.
But within a local government context, a similar challenge arises there because, look, I enjoy being on the support side of the organisation. I'm not a politician. I'm working in support of the lead politician of the organisation, but the role is the same, whoever is in charge and whoever is in the council chamber. I really sympathise with mayors in the sense that they're the directors of very large corporate organisations in charge of a board that they've had no say whatsoever in the selection of.
Correct.
And that's a major challenge. And I'm keen to help our mayor wherever possible with the process of getting the best outcome, building greater spirit, if you like, between the elected representatives and their relationship with the organisation. And you'd know it well. It's a challenge.
Crucial, and it's hard to get effective decision making out of a board that often has such a diversity of expertise and experiences.
That's right. Yeah.
Paul, we spoke there about challenging. What would be your greatest highlight over this period of time in local government?
It's a hard one, that, because there's so much going on all the time. When I was thinking about this area, I was thinking one particular instance is both a highlight and a low light, which was the 2011 floods. They were staggering and amazing to everybody in Toowoomba. And as people said in the media, how do you have a tsunami on top of a hill? But that's what it was. It was just staggering and quite frightening, just watching the power of the water surging through. In that situation, I was cut off from home here for a week. I was living in Toowoomba, and it was a highlight in the sense of just seeing the way that the council workers and the other local authorities, the police and rescue and so on, all pulled together and handled the whole situation. And it was all hands to the pumps, not literally, for a whole week, and then for many months after that. The low light, of course, was the terrible fact that lives were lost.
Very much so. What is the most difficult part of your role, Paul?
I can't really identify anything that stands out as being the thing that I least like.
Paul, are you the sort of chap that gets out of bed with a spring in the step and looks forward to the challenges each day?
Yeah, to a fair extent, but it's balanced by a sense of proportion. I recognise that things about which some people get terribly het up, they're not always as life and death as people think they are. I've worked in situations where the activities going on are a matter of life and death.
Yep.
And it's good to be able to keep a bit of perspective. Even terribly controversial issues like amalgamation and de-amalgamation, they're very emotive for a lot of folk, but you've got to sort of keep your perspective and just try and see what's the best thing to do to help things forward at any given time.
What are the best things about working in local government? I mean, it's always argued that it is the closest level of government to the people. What do you believe are the best things about working in this sector?
Well, for me, one of them is the fact that everything that local government does is of real use. It really affects the community. And another factor of it is that the people you work with are a great bunch to work with. But by and large, they're there because they like doing it, they believe in the community, they want to help. Because they're not there for the money, they're not highly paid. They're not there for the kudos because local government tends to be, laughed at and belittled by everybody.
Yep.
So the fact of being with the sort of people who believe in community and work doggedly for it, you get some people who, in any area, who perhaps shouldn't be there and try and do as little as possible, but they don't last very long in local government.
No.
So those factors are terribly effective. Now, I've worked in very small organisations that are trying to do the best for the community and you know, inevitably go up and down there at the whim of policy changes and so on. Local government has sufficient strength and momentum to be very continuous in its efforts, and that I think is a very good thing. Yeah, I've seen lots of involvements that you could look at and say, well, yeah, there's good points about that, but here are the down points. I don't see a lot of down points in local government, except in the way that local government struggles for resourcing. And one of the downsides, it's not really a downside in my experience, but the downside is what I've seen over a period, and I realise this leaps forward to another question, but the gradual erosion of local government's resources because state and federal governments have cost shifted onto local government without, quite shamelessly.
Yes.
And so there are real challenges and shortcomings there, and it is always disappointing to see how the media tends to see local government is closest to the community, but it's also closest to local media, so it's an automatic whipping boy if you look at something. Yeah,
but and to a degree, the good thing is the media keeps us all in check. Sometimes,
right, yes.
Sometimes, and at other times it creates the issues that aren't really issues, which don't really regard or require that sort of level of checking.
I mean, to be fair, from the Toowoomba point of view, involvement with the media is pretty positive overall. I mean, there have been down points, but with the Toowoomba Council and with the Mayor, there's a sort of a willingness to recognise the role of the media and be very engaged with them, and I think that probably helps them to take a balanced approach too.
Okay. I'm moving fairly quickly through here. I'm going to go to the last question, and that is, what would you say to your former self all that time ago when you started in local government, or even before you started in local government? There's very few people who turn 18 and say, I think I'm going to go and work in local government. How would you advise people about local government as a career option or an employment option for young people to consider, or as you did, as a person to change from one industry to another?
Well, involvement in local government is something you can be very proud of. Until you're in there, you don't recognise that. I can recall, 11 years ago when I first started there, I went through a two-day induction, and each of the general managers actually got up in front of everybody starting and explained what they did and what their challenges were. And I was quite staggered because I hadn't, I was going in with my eyes open to work in local government, but I really didn't appreciate just how much local government does, how essential it is to all of our lives, recognising that basically apart from, defence and foreign policy, everything's looked after through local government. Health and education, not in this country, but almost everything else is there. I have to admit, I didn't come into local government having been an 18-year-old thinking I want to get into local government. It's a series of experiences that led me to realise, well, this is somewhere where that's really important in the community, and I think I can really make a contribution to all the things that I've done in the past. So to have pride in what you're doing and to embrace the breadth of what goes on, it's actually quite easy. I've been involved in the LGMA local government
management challenge.
Management challenge as a participant of the rural area and the state area, and also as an assessor, and it's a real eye opener for everybody that gets involved in it, because they'll often say, look, even in my own council, I never realised we did so much. and how broadly. And it's very easy to get trapped in a silo, and that's one of the key things to avoid for your own sake and for the community's sake, because the silos are the enemy of innovation and things going forward. So if people are interested, they're getting involved with local government, this is not an ad for LGMA, but I gained a lot out of those management challenges. I went to one of the leadership development programs, which was run by former CEOs and current CEOs, and found that very, very revealing and very inspiring. So every training opportunity and every opportunity to cross boundaries and learn more more broadly rewards the effort greatly.
Fantastic, Paul. I think we might leave it there. Can I, on behalf of the LGMA, thank you for the glowing references, and look forward to your continued contribution to Toowoomba Regional Council.
Thanks, David.